German shepherd named Rocky stood frozen in front of an empty house, his eyes fixed on the decaying front door, never wavering. The sun had long since set, but Rocky didn't notice. His gaze was unwavering, locked onto the old decaying front door of the abandoned house. His fur was matted and covered in dust, but there was no motion in him, no sign of rest. He had been standing like this for hours, days, weeks. The world seemed to move around him, yet he remained still, as if his entire being was anchored to that spot. The shadows stretched over him, but Rocky didn't flinch. His eyes, full of something only he understood, never left the rotting door. What was it about this house? Why was Rocky so drawn to it? His unwavering gaze created an aura of mystery, one that the neighbors couldn't ignore. Every day, without fail, they would see him there, frozen, as if waiting for something, or someone. Neighbors would often see Rocky, motionless, as if time stood still around him, his tail barely moving, his eyes never leaving the window. As the days passed, the neighbors began to notice him more. Some of them had grown accustomed to his presence, but they never stopped wondering why he stood so motionless. His tail was barely visible, just a flicker now and then, a soft twitch when the wind picked up. But his eyes, those eyes never strayed from the house. They'd watch him from their windows, from their porches. The old man across the street would shake his head, muttering about how dogs have a way of sensing things humans can't. A woman down the block would take her dog for walks, always pausing to look at Rocky, her eyes filled with concern. But Rocky paid no mind to them. He never reacted to the people around him. His focus never wavered. The world moved, but Rocky was still. The mystery deepened. There was something more to Rocky's behavior, something that hinted at a deeper connection with the house, something the neighbors didn't fully understand. Though the house had been empty for years, there was something undeniably magnetic about the German shepherd's daily watch over it. The house had stood empty for years. Its windows were boarded up, and the lawn was overgrown with weeds, the grass poking through like the remnants of forgotten memories. No one had lived there in ages, yet there was a strange gravity around it. The place felt alive, as if it still held a secret, a story left untold. Rocky, with his deep, unyielding gaze, seemed to sense that secret. Every day he came back, without fail, positioning himself in front of the house as though waiting for something, someone, to return. The house may have been abandoned, but to Rocky it wasn't. It was his place, his responsibility. Neighbors often wondered, why this house? Why this dog? They couldn't explain it, but the magnetic force between Rocky and the house was impossible to ignore. Sarah, a newcomer to the neighborhood, couldn't help but be drawn to the dog's vigil. Something about him seemed too determined to ignore. Sarah had only recently moved into the neighborhood, but she noticed the dog on her first day. There was something about him, his stillness, his determination, that tugged at her heart. She could see him from her window, standing outside the house, unflinching, unmoving. As a newcomer, she had no context for the dog or the house, but she felt an undeniable pull. The strange connection between Rocky and the house piqued her curiosity. There was something so deeply emotional in the way he watched over it, as if he was guarding a piece of his past. Unable to resist, Sarah made her way outside one morning, her footsteps crunching the leaves on the ground. Rocky's eyes flicked toward her for a moment, but his stance didn't change. He was still the silent guardian of the house. But as Sarah passed by him, her heart caught in her throat. There was pain in those eyes, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was waiting for something, waiting for someone. The house stood as an eerie, silent witness to the years of neglect. With no signs of life, it almost seemed as though it held a secret, one that even Rocky was desperate to reveal. The house wasn't just old, it was a relic of something forgotten. The front door hung loosely on its hinges, the windows blacked out with decay. A sense of emptiness filled the air around it, but Sarah could feel it. The house seemed to carry a weight, a history buried beneath its crumbling walls. She walked around the perimeter, peeking through the cracks, hoping to find a glimpse of what had once been. It was like a puzzle waiting to be solved. And then, just as she was about to give up, she turned back to see Rocky's unwavering stance. His eyes, still fixed on the same window, seemed to ask her to understand. What was the connection between this dog and this house? Sarah felt certain that Rocky knew the secret, but would he ever reveal it? The mystery deepened as the house stood as a silent witness, one that seemed to speak only through the German shepherd's steadfast presence. Day after day, Rocky's eyes remained locked on that abandoned house, as if waiting for something, or someone, who might never come. Sarah couldn't shake the image of Rocky's quiet watch. Every time she walked past him, she saw the same thing. The dog, standing motionless, eyes locked onto the window of the house, as if waiting for someone who might never return. The emotion in his gaze struck her deeply. There was something heart-wrenching about it. The sense of endless waiting, the silent plea that no one could hear. Every day, without fail, Rocky would return to the same spot, as if time had no meaning for him. But it meant everything: his loyalty, his patience, his unspoken love. It was a bond stronger than any words could describe. For Sarah, it was impossible not to feel the weight of it. Rocky's vigil was not just for the house, it was for the memory of something lost. She didn't know what it was yet, but she could feel that this was more than just a dog's habit. This was a mission, and somehow she was becoming a part of it. Sarah, a recent transplant to the town, noticed Rocky one cold morning as she passed by the house. The sight of him, so still and solemn, made her stop. A dog shouldn't be so focused on an empty house, she thought. Sarah was new to the sleepy town, still trying to find her rhythm in this unfamiliar place. The house she passed every morning on her way to work seemed almost abandoned, with its chipped paint and overgrown yard. But it was the dog that caught her attention, Rocky. He stood there, unmoving, at the foot of the porch, staring at the house with an intensity that felt almost human. His fur was matted from the cold, and his eyes, though full of quiet resolve, spoke of something deeper, something unknown. Sarah paused for a moment, squinting against the wind. It wasn't the kind of behavior she expected from a dog. Why wasn't he playing, or roaming, or barking like the others she'd seen around? The house was empty, or at least it looked that way, and yet Rocky was fixated on it as if waiting for something or someone. Intrigued and slightly puzzled, Sarah continued her walk, but she couldn't shake the image of the dog frozen in place, guarding the house like an unspoken promise. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the image of Rocky, standing motionless at the same spot. She found herself looking out her window, wondering what drove him to remain there, day after day. Days passed, and Sarah couldn't help but find herself drawn back to the sight of Rocky each morning. It was always the same. Him, standing at the same spot near the porch, staring at the house with the same quiet intensity. It didn't matter if it rained or if the wind howled through the trees. Rocky never moved. Sarah felt a growing connection to the dog, despite their limited interactions. There was something about his unwavering gaze, as if he was trying to tell her something. One morning, she found herself standing at her window, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee, watching him from a distance. What was he waiting for? It was almost as though the dog was a fixture of the house itself, like he had become one with the place, his presence as constant as the seasons. Her curiosity shifted into concern. What would compel a dog to remain so stationary for days on end, especially when there was no one around to watch over him? On one chilly afternoon, Sarah decided to approach Rocky. She stepped closer, her voice soft, calling to him, "Hey there, boy, what are you waiting for?" But Rocky didn't move. His gaze never left the house. Unable to quell her curiosity any longer, Sarah decided to make her first move. It was a cold afternoon, the air thick with a biting chill. She wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck, making her way toward the house where Rocky still stood as though guarding the silent building. As she approached, her heart quickened. She had no idea what to expect. What if the dog was territorial or fearful of strangers? But when she called out to him, her voice was quiet and gentle. "Hey there, boy, what are you waiting for?" Rocky didn't flinch. He didn't even glance at her. His eyes remained fixed on the house, unblinking and steadfast. His body was tense, as if ready to spring into action, but still, he didn't move. Sarah felt a pang of disappointment, but it wasn't just because Rocky didn't respond. It was the sense that she had interrupted something important, something personal, and Rocky wasn't ready to share it. She took a step back, unsure of what to do next. For a moment she felt foolish, but she quickly reminded herself that sometimes trust didn't come easily. As Sarah observed, she began to notice subtle details. Rocky's eyes would flicker toward the house's cracked window. His ears would perk up at certain times of the day as if expecting someone to appear. Over the next few days, Sarah's observations of Rocky became more focused. She began to notice small but significant details about his behavior. For one, his eyes would occasionally flicker toward the cracked window of the house, as though he were waiting for someone to appear. His ears would twitch, and he'd lean forward ever so slightly, like he was listening for a sound only he could hear. There was an eerie rhythm to his actions, and Sarah found herself growing increasingly fascinated by his fixation. It wasn't just the fact that he was standing there. It was the precision, the almost deliberate way he responded to the faintest movements in the house. It was as if he was anticipating something, or someone. Was it the wind, the creaking of the house, or was there a person inside? Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, but she couldn't figure out the answer, and the longer she watched, the more she felt like an outsider in a quiet mystery she couldn't unravel. Something felt off. Sarah couldn't help but wonder if Rocky's obsession with the house was rooted in something deeper. Was he waiting for an owner who'd never return, or had he been abandoned? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah felt a nagging sense of unease. Rocky's vigil had become a fixture of her daily routine, but now it felt different. She found herself wondering what exactly was keeping him there. There was a sadness in his eyes now that she hadn't noticed before. Could it be that he was waiting for an owner who had left? Or was he lost, abandoned to fend for himself? The idea tugged at Sarah's heart. She knew that dogs were loyal, but this seemed different. Rocky's eyes seemed to hold a sorrowful promise, as if he were waiting for someone to come back, a return that might never happen. The possibility that he had been abandoned gnawed at Sarah, and she felt an overwhelming urge to do something. She couldn't stand by and watch this dog continue his solitary vigil, his hope fading with every passing day. Late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah saw a shadowy figure in the window of the house. Rocky's eyes followed it with unwavering focus, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Then, one evening, as the last light of day faded into twilight, Sarah saw something that made her blood run cold. A shadow, a dark, elongated shape, moved behind the cracked window of the house. For a moment, she couldn't make out what it was, but Rocky's reaction was immediate. His body tensed, and a low growl rumbled from his chest, vibrating in the stillness of the evening air. His eyes never left the shadow, his gaze more intense than ever. The dog's reaction sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She felt a rising sense of dread, as though someone, was inside the house, and it was tied to Rocky's behavior. What had she stumbled into? The mystery deepened, and she realized that there was far more to this dog's watchful gaze than she had ever anticipated. The unknown loomed closer, and she was drawn in deeper than she had intended. Over the next few weeks, Sarah found herself returning to the house at the same time each day. The familiar creak of the old wooden porch, the soft rustling of wind through the trees. These sounds were now a part of her daily routine. Each time she arrived, Rocky's eyes softened when he saw her, a flicker of recognition that hadn't been there before. His body, still tense, would retreat slightly, but there was no growl, no sharp warning. One day, Sarah crouched low, keeping her distance but extending her hand in the gentlest way possible. Rocky's ears twitched, and for a moment she thought he might bolt. But instead, he hesitated. His eyes locked with hers, studying her for what felt like an eternity. Then, ever so slowly, he took a small step forward. His tail, once tucked and rigid, gave a hesitant wag, a single, uncertain movement. It was subtle, but to Sarah it felt like the world had shifted. She didn't reach for him, not yet. She knew better than to rush. But the trust, small as it was, meant everything. The bond was beginning, and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before it would grow into something stronger. Each visit, Sarah brought something new for Rocky: food, toys, and soft bedding. She knew that nurturing him went beyond just food. It was about creating a space where he could feel safe. The dog was wary at first, his eyes full of distrust and his movements stiff with fear. But Sarah, with her calm and patient demeanor, spoke to him in soothing tones. She made sure her presence was non-threatening, taking her time to sit quietly and allow him to come to her. At first, he would eye the food from a distance, only inching closer when he felt no immediate threat. It wasn't until the third day that he finally stepped up to the bowl, his mouth trembling as he sniffed the contents. His hesitation was visible, but there was no panic this time. He sniffed again, then took a tentative bite. His eyes flicked toward Sarah, then back to the food, as though deciding whether to trust her. A small breakthrough, but a breakthrough nonetheless. Slowly, the fear began to fade, piece by piece, replaced with the faintest sense of curiosity. Each day, Rocky's movements grew less rigid, and each bite he took seemed to pull him closer to the realization that not all humans were to be feared. After weeks of patience, Sarah noticed a subtle change in Rocky. Each day, she found him waiting by the door, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. His tail, once immobile, now wagged with an enthusiasm she hadn't expected. He didn't run to her immediately. He was still cautious, but he was no longer hiding, no longer retreating. One afternoon, as Sarah sat beside him on the floor, reading aloud a passage from her book, something unexpected happened. Rocky, who had been watching her quietly from his usual spot, suddenly leaned his body against hers. Then, with a deep exhale, he placed his head gently in her lap. Sarah froze. The weight of his head was a gift, a silent offering of trust. She carefully stroked his fur, feeling the subtle tremor in his body, a reminder that the past had left its scars. But this moment, this gesture, was the start of something more. Rocky had chosen to reach out to her, to accept the affection she had offered. Sarah couldn't help but smile, a tear slipping down her cheek. It was a small step for him, but a giant leap for both of them. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when Sarah would sit silently beside Rocky, just the two of them together in the quiet. She began to notice things, subtle reactions, little signs that told her more about the dog's past. One evening, as they sat on the porch, a loud car backfired down the road. Rocky's body stiffened in an instant, his eyes wide and pupils dilated with panic. His breathing became shallow and he trembled, his tail tucked tightly between his legs. Sarah's heart clenched as she reached out to him, her voice low and soothing. "It's okay, Rocky, you're safe here." But it wasn't enough. He paced restlessly, whimpering, as if the noise had torn through the layers of his healing and brought him back to a time of fear. She wondered then what had happened to him before he came to the house. What had caused this deep-seated terror? Each new incident of fear, whether it was the loud sound of the wind or a distant clap of thunder, was a piece of the puzzle, a sign of something that had left Rocky scarred, both mentally and emotionally. Sarah's heart ached for him. It became clear that there was more to Rocky's past than she had imagined. She couldn't erase the trauma, but she could be there for him, offering him a safe place to heal. On one of their long walks through the surrounding woods, Sarah noticed something strange. Rocky had stopped at a familiar spot near the edge of the property, his nose twitching as he sniffed the ground. She paused, watching him, noticing how his body seemed to go still, almost reverent. He began circling the spot, then lowered his head, his nose brushing the earth as if he were searching for something, or someone. Sarah crouched beside him, her heart thumping in her chest. What was this place to him? Why did it seem so important? She noticed a worn patch of dirt, as though Rocky had visited this spot countless times before. There were traces of an old scent, faded but still lingering in the air. He stood there for a long moment, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. His loyalty to this place ran deeper than she had realized. It struck her that perhaps this was the spot where he had once been left behind, or where he had once found safety. It was a mystery she could never fully solve, but it deepened her understanding of Rocky's attachment to the house. There was something here, something that held the key to his past, and Sarah was determined to help him uncover it, one step at a time. Despite the progress they had made, there were days when Sarah would find Rocky staring out the window, his eyes distant, as though waiting for something, or someone, to return. His posture was tense, and his expression seemed haunted, as though he were trapped in a memory he couldn't escape. Sarah would sit beside him in silence, wondering if she was truly helping him heal, or if his past was something too deep for her to fix. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was only scratching the surface of what had happened to him. There were days when she would find him retreating into himself, hiding from the world as if it were too much to bear. Her concern for him deepened with each passing day. She had become so deeply invested in his well-being, in his journey toward healing, that she felt every moment of his retreat, every sign that there was more to his pain than she had yet discovered. Sarah knew she couldn't rush him, couldn't force him to heal faster than he was ready. But she also knew that whatever had happened to Rocky in the past was far from over. And as much as she wanted to understand it, to fix it, she realized that sometimes the most important thing she could offer him was just her presence, her unwavering love, her patient understanding, and her commitment to helping him through the darkness of his past. One afternoon, Sarah followed Rocky to the house as he led her inside. There, hidden behind the broken walls, was a stack of old letters and a photo of a man who looked strangely familiar, someone Sarah had seen in the neighborhood years ago but never knew well. The room was dim, the air thick with dust, but Sarah followed Rocky with quiet determination. She had been trying to understand him, to make sense of the deep, silent bond he had formed with this abandoned house. As she stepped through the threshold, The house seemed to whisper its secrets to her, as though welcoming her closer. Rocky trotted ahead, his tail flicking with a purpose. He led her to the farthest corner of the room, a place that seemed almost untouched by time. She knelt beside him, noticing a stack of old, yellowed letters tucked away behind a broken piece of wood. Her heart quickened as she carefully opened one of the letters, reading the familiar handwriting that seemed to carry the weight of years long past. But it was the photo beneath it that stopped her. A faded image of a man standing beside Rocky, his arm around the dog in a way that spoke of years of companionship. The man's face stirred something inside Sarah. She didn't recognize him fully, but there was something about him that felt familiar. As she held the photo in her hands, the house around her felt less like a ruin and more like a memory, a place where time had stopped, waiting for something that had yet to come. As Sarah examines the photo more closely, the pieces begin to fit together. The man in the picture wasn't just a former neighbor, he was the original owner of the house, the person who had once shared a deep bond with Rocky. The truth hit Sarah hard. Rocky had been waiting all these years for a reunion that would never come. The photo shook in Sarah's hands as realization crashed over her like a cold wave. The man in the picture was no stranger. He was a former neighbor, someone she had seen around the neighborhood but never spoken to. She had seen him leave years ago, his car packed, leaving with a hurried sense of finality. She never thought much of it, thinking it was just another family moving away. But now, as she looked at the photo, she saw something deeper. The connection between this man and Rocky wasn't just that of an owner and a pet. It was a bond rooted in love, loyalty, and companionship. It hit Sarah with the force of a truth she hadn't anticipated. Rocky had been waiting all this time, not for a new life, not for a new home, but for this man to return. All these years, as he walked through the neighborhood with her, Sarah had been oblivious to the dog's past, to the silent ache that had never healed. Rocky hadn't given up on waiting for the one person who had been his world, until that world crumbled. Overwhelmed by the weight of the discovery, Sarah sits down, holding the photo close. The letters scattered around her reveal a story of love, loss, and a promise that was never fulfilled. She feels the pain Rocky must have carried all this time, alone in his waiting. The letters around her seemed to speak a language she wasn't prepared to understand. They told a story of a promise made long ago, of a love between a man and his dog that had been abruptly torn apart. The ink, faded and smudged in places, told of plans, of life, of a bond that had been taken for granted. But there was something deeper, a feeling of abandonment, of something left unfinished. Sarah's heart tightened as she read on, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She realized that Rocky hadn't just been waiting for a man. He had been waiting for a love that had been taken from him without warning, and he had been left behind, clinging to the only thing that remained. This house, this memory. The weight of this discovery was almost too much for her to bear. As she held the photo close, she could almost feel the dog's pain, his loss, his hope. All these years he had carried this unspoken grief, never able to move on. The compassion she had always felt for Rocky now deepened, and she knew that his waiting was more than just loyalty. It was a wound that had never healed. As Sarah sits with the weight of the letters in her hands, the door creaks open. A man, older but unmistakably the same as the figure in the photo, steps into the room. Rocky, who had been waiting for so long, reacts with a mix of hesitation and hope. The man's presence shakes Sarah to the core. This is the moment that could change everything for them both. The silence in the room felt unbearable, heavy with the realization of everything Rocky had endured. Sarah could hardly breathe, her heart pounding in her chest. And then the creak of the door, soft at first, like a hesitant step, and the unmistakable sound of someone entering. Sarah's gaze snapped up, her pulse quickening. The man who stood in the doorway was older, his face lined with time and sorrow, but it was him, without a doubt. The man from the photo, the one who had disappeared years ago. Rocky's ears perked up, his body tense. For a moment, he stood still, unsure. Then, like a slow wave rising to the shore, he moved toward the man. His steps were cautious, each one measured, as if the dog wasn't sure what to expect. His tail twitched, his eyes flickering between hesitation and hope. The emotional charge in the room was palpable. This was the moment that could undo years of pain or open a wound too deep to heal. Sarah stood frozen, watching the scene unfold. The man's face softened as he saw the dog approach, his own emotions struggling to break free. Rocky, who had waited for so long, was now facing the ghost of his past. The question of what would happen next hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to break. Sarah watches as Rocky cautiously approaches the man, sniffing his hand. The dog's hesitation speaks volumes. He's unsure if he can trust the person who abandoned him. Sarah is torn, feeling a deep responsibility to Rocky, but also knowing that this reunion might bring closure that he desperately needs. Sarah's breath caught as she watched Rocky's every move. The dog's hesitation was so obvious, so painfully clear. It wasn't just fear, it was uncertainty, a reluctance to trust the very person who had left him behind. Sarah's heart ached for him, for the confusion he must have felt, and yet she also recognized something in his actions. There was hope in his movements, a tiny flicker of something that had been buried deep within him for so long. She felt the weight of the situation settle in her chest. She was torn, pulled in two different directions. On one hand, she wanted to shield Rocky from the pain of the past, to protect him from the hurt of being left behind. But on the other hand, she understood, deep down, that this was his moment. He had carried this loss for so long, and perhaps this reunion was the key to his healing. Sarah's mind raced. Should she allow this moment to unfold? Should she let Rocky face the man who had abandoned him? Or should she step in, protect him from further pain? The man speaks softly, recounting the painful story of how he had to leave Rocky behind due to an unforeseen circumstance. He had been forced to move, leaving the dog in the house with no way of taking him along. Sarah listens, heartbroken, as the man reveals that he never intended to abandon Rocky, but circumstances had made it impossible for them to stay together. The man's voice was soft, a whisper that trembled with sorrow as he spoke. "I never wanted to leave him," he said, his eyes never leaving Rocky. "But life, it's cruel sometimes. I had to move, and there was no way I could take him with me. I thought I'd be back for him, but I never came back." Sarah listened, her heart sinking with every word. The man's regret was palpable, but the pain behind his words was even more so. He hadn't wanted to abandon Rocky, but circumstances had made it impossible for them to stay together. The revelation was devastating. For years, this man had carried the same heartbreak that Rocky had, never intending to leave the dog behind, but unable to change the course of his life. After hearing the full story, Sarah faces the hardest choice yet. Should she help Rocky find peace by allowing him to reconnect with his past, or should she keep him close, continuing the bond they have formed? It's a decision that could shape their future together. Sarah's world felt like it was collapsing in on itself as she stood there, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She knew that whatever choice she made, it would change everything. If she allowed this reunion, it could bring closure for Rocky, give him the peace he had been waiting for. But what about the bond they had formed? What would that mean for her and Rocky, for the life they had begun to build together? Her heart ached as she looked at the man, then at Rocky, his loyal eyes full of a silent plea. It was a choice between the past and the future, between letting go and holding on. With the final piece of the puzzle in place, Sarah stood at the edge of the porch, gazing out at the house. Her heart felt heavy, but the weight of uncertainty that had once clouded her mind had begun to lift. She had tracked down Rocky's original family, and after a long search, she had arranged for them to come and take him home. The mystery that had haunted both of them, the question of where he truly belonged, had finally been answered. Rocky's past, though painful, was now part of a larger story that was slowly coming to a close. As Sarah watched him, his body still but strong beside her, she realized just how far he had come. His constant, anxious gaze at the house had always been a silent plea, a cry for something he had lost, something he needed to find. But now, that look has transformed. His eyes, once filled with longing, now seemed to say goodbye to a chapter of his life that he had never understood. No longer did he stare at the house with the same desperation. His posture had softened, and Sarah knew that it wasn't just the house that had changed. It was him too. His journey of healing had finally found its closure. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she watched Rocky take one last look at the house. The place where he had spent so many restless days, waiting for a family that might never come, stood silent now, as if it too understood the weight of the moment. Rocky's once uncertain eyes, filled with a quiet, unspoken plea, now reflected a calm acceptance. It was at that moment that Sarah knew he was ready to move on. No more longing. No more waiting. The emotional tension of the years he had spent in search of something, or someone, had melted away. There was peace now, for both of them. She reached out to gently stroke his fur, a silent promise that no matter what happened, he would never have to face that loneliness again. She had helped him heal, and in doing so, she had healed too. The decision was harder than Sarah had imagined. She stood by the window, staring at Rocky as he lay at her feet, the soft rise and fall of his chest a steady reminder of the bond they had formed over the months. The call had come from his original family. They were ready to take him back. The news had filled her with a bittersweet sense of relief. This was the right thing, wasn't it? But as she thought about letting him go, a deep ache formed in her chest. She had never imagined how strong her attachment to him would become. Rocky had been through so much, and she had been there for him every step of the way. They had learned to trust one another in ways that words could never fully explain. But now, standing at the crossroads of her heart, she knew what she had to do. With a heavy heart, Sarah realized that her desire to keep him couldn't outweigh his need to heal fully. His reunion with his family would give him the closure he had been searching for. And while the thought of letting him go was painful, it was also the most loving decision she could make. She couldn't hold him back from finding true peace, no matter how much she wished otherwise. As the day slowly turned to evening, Sarah and Rocky sat together in the quiet of the yard. The air was cool, the sky painted with hues of soft orange and purple as the sun dipped below the horizon. Sarah's heart swelled with emotions as she looked down at him. Rocky's head rested gently on her lap, his body warm against her legs. For the first time in a long while, there was no tension between them. There were no unspoken questions or fears. It was just the two of them, in perfect silence. She ran her fingers through his fur, feeling the strength of the connection between them. Rocky's eyes were closed now, his breathing steady. It was a peaceful moment, one that told them both that no matter what the future held, they had done what they needed to. In that stillness, They both knew that this was the closure they had been waiting for. Their journey together had been one of healing, of love, and of letting go. And now, Sarah felt at peace, knowing that Rocky was finally free from the haunting weight of the past. As Sarah looked toward the driveway, the car containing Rocky's original family pulled up. Her heart ached, but she smiled softly as she watched them step out of the vehicle. She had seen the hope in their eyes, the same hope that had been in Rocky's for so long. This was right. This was where he truly belonged. She stood, giving Rocky one last affectionate pat on the head before stepping aside to let his new family approach. There was no need for words, no more explanations. The bond that they shared had been powerful, but now it was time for Rocky to start a new chapter of his life, one filled with the love and warmth he had always deserved. As they took him into their arms, Sarah's heart felt lighter. It was hard, yes, but it was also a relief. She knew she had done what was best for him, and in doing so, had allowed herself to heal as well. As the family drove away with Rocky, Sarah turned back toward her home. The sunset cast long shadows, but in her heart there was a quiet joy. She had given Rocky the peace he had needed, and in doing so, had found a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known she was searching for. With every step she took, Sarah felt a sense of closure. Sometimes love meant letting go, even when it was the hardest thing to do. And as she stood there, watching the road stretch out before her, she knew that both Rocky and herself were ready for the next chapter in their lives, separate yet forever changed by the bond they had shared. Rocky's unwavering loyalty, despite the abandonment and years of waiting, serves as a testament to the deep bond animals share with humans. His journey reflects the unspoken promise that love, once given, never truly fades. Rocky's story isn't just one of survival, it's a powerful testament to the depth of loyalty an animal can offer. Despite the pain of being abandoned, left to fend for himself in a world that had turned its back on him, he never stopped waiting. Every day, every night, Rocky stayed. He waited for the human who had once shown him love, the human who had been his world. Even in his solitude, he never gave up. His loyalty to his past was unwavering, quietly echoing the truth that love, once given, never truly fades. The bond he shared with his original family, though severed by abandonment, remained etched in his heart, guiding him through the darkest of days. Throughout his journey, Rocky never gave up. His resilience through hunger, loneliness, and confusion reveals how animals possess an inner strength that keeps them going, even when it seems there is no hope. In the face of unimaginable hardships, Rocky never gave up. Through hunger, loneliness, and the confusion of his days on the street, he fought to survive. His body weakened, but his spirit remained unbroken. It's in moments like these, when it seems all hope is lost, that Rocky's inner strength shone brightest. His resilience served as a powerful reminder of the untold strength animals carry within, a strength that can push them to endure even when the world offers nothing but darkness. Rocky's journey was more than survival. It was a testament to the strength that comes from within when there's a will to live. Sarah's act of giving Rocky a second chance changes both their lives. The bond they share represents how love, when nurtured, can mend even the most broken hearts. It's a reminder that every living being deserves a chance to heal. When Sarah found Rocky, she didn't just offer him a home, she offered him a second chance at life, at love, and at trust. Her act of kindness changed both their worlds. Rocky, who had been broken by abandonment, began to heal under Sarah's gentle care. With every meal, every walk, every comforting gesture, his wounds, both physical and emotional, began to close. Their bond, built on patience and understanding, became a symbol of the transformative power of love. It's a reminder that no matter how broken or scarred a being may be, every living creature deserves a chance to heal, to feel love again, and to be loved. Rocky's journey reminds us that love never forgets, and even after abandonment, the heart can find a path to forgiveness and healing. His story is one of hope, resilience, and the incredible strength of bonds that endure beyond time and pain. Rocky's journey is a beacon of hope for all of us. It reminds us that love, despite the scars of abandonment, never forgets. His heart, though wounded, was capable of forgiveness, and through Sarah's love it was healed. Rocky's story is not just one of survival, but of renewal. It tells us that no matter how deep the pain, the heart can always find a way to heal. His bond with Sarah, forged through patience and love, became stronger than the wounds of his past. His story shows us that the bonds we share, whether with animals or humans, can endure beyond time and pain, blossoming into something beautiful, something that heals, forgives, and never forgets.